Captain Relia Thorne didn't have time to think, only to act. The rift was collapsing behind her, its edges pulsing like a wound torn through the fabric of space. She had chased the energy signal from the outer moons of Alexia 9, a rogue pulse unlike anything the Varelian Council had ever seen, and when it jumped again, tearing open a portal stitched together with chaotic wavelengths and unstable matter, she had followed without hesitation. That was her mission. After all, first in, last out. But something went wrong. The moment she stepped through the swirling gateway, a blast of electric distortion surged around her, hotter than plasma and wilder than any portal she had used before. Her protective suit, reinforced with alien alloys, simply vanished, disintegrated by the force of the unstable human-built technology that had been spliced into the portal. Before she could even scream, light devoured her, gravity twisted, and she fell. Not just through space, but through worlds. Relia crashed onto a hard-tiled floor beneath a white ceiling that buzzed with artificial lights. Her skin, normally shielded beneath armor, felt raw and cold against the unfamiliar air. She groaned, pushing herself up, her long silver hair falling across her shoulders. Around her, sirens began to wail, echoing through the chamber. Men and women in lab coats shouted and stumbled backward, some gasping, others frozen in place. One scientist dropped his datapad. Another pressed something on the wall that made steel doors begin to close. Her eyes adjusted quickly. The gravity was heavy but tolerable, the language strange but not impossible. Still dazed, she took a breath and realized, with rising horror, that she was unclothed. Completely. Her face flushed a shade darker blue, a rare expression of embarrassment for her kind. This wasn't a battlefield. It was a human laboratory, filled with confused and frightened researchers who had just witnessed a naked alien woman fall from a hole in the air. Then someone stepped forward. A tall man, unarmed, eyes wide with surprise but not fear. He didn't move with the others, didn't call for containment or grab a weapon. Instead, he removed his long lab coat and quietly held it out to her. She stared at him, uncertain. "It's okay," he said softly, slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you." His voice was calm, the cadence careful, like he was speaking to a wild animal or something, just as unknown. Relia hesitated, then took the coat and wrapped it around herself, her pride aching but her survival instincts stronger. He continued, "My name is Dr. Mason Hale. Can you understand me?" She blinked, then nodded once. His language was unfamiliar, but the translator chip implanted behind her ear had already begun parsing it. "Relia Thorne," she said, her voice rough. "I came through the breach." Her words were broken, but the urgency was clear. "Your kind. Open something. Something that should have stayed shut." Behind Mason, two guards entered with stun rifles raised, shouting commands. Mason raised his hands. "Wait, she's not attacking." "She's confused." "You saw what happened." The guards weren't convinced, but they didn't fire. Within minutes, Relia was surrounded scanners, medical drones, voices asking questions she didn't fully understand. She gave none of her secrets, only warnings. The rift was unstable, growing, and the technology used to open it was based on stolen algorithms from the Council's forbidden research. The humans didn't seem to grasp the danger. They saw a visitor, a miracle, not a warning sign. Mason stayed close, translating and softening the harsh questions of the others. When she asked where she was, he explained Earth, a research center in a place called Nevada, where they had been experimenting with quantum portals under government contracts. "We didn't know it would reach anything," Mason admitted. "We thought it was just energy." Relia looked at him, eyes hard. "You reached far," she said. "Too far." That night, they moved her to a secure chamber. She was given food, rest, and earth clothes that barely fit her. Still, she didn't resist. Not yet. Her mind was already calculating. The rift signature had not only reached the Varelian network, it had pierced deeper, into something far worse. The humans thought they had touched a new frontier. In truth, they had woken an ancient algorithm sealed long ago by a coalition of 5 galaxies. An entity known only as the Null Mind, once defeated but never destroyed, now loose once more. Later, alone in a dim-lit holding room, she sat cross-legged, deep in thought. The human named Mason had left her with a data device and a simple question: who are you running from? She hadn't answered. Not yet. Her people would never forgive her for leaking secrets to an outsider, especially a human. But this one Mason was different. He didn't look at her like a specimen or a threat. He looked at her like a puzzle worth solving. And something about that unnerved her more than all the weapons in the world. The door hissed open. Mason entered alone, holding a tablet. "I've translated part of the energy pattern you came through," he said, not waiting for a reply. "It's layered. Not just a portal, something inside the signal. Something. Alive." Relia looked up sharply. "You saw it." He nodded. "Barely. Like static. But it moved." She stood, letting the coat fall to her sides, forgotten in her urgency. "Then your world is in danger." Mason looked at her, unsure. "You mean that?" "Yes," she said coldly. "Your kind broke the stars." And for a moment, the room fell quiet. The stars, once distant, now felt terrifyingly close. Mason didn't speak. He just stared at her, understanding dawning in his eyes. Not just awe, but fear. Not of her, but of what might be coming through the next rift. And this time, it wouldn't be someone asking for help. The room where Relia was kept was clean, white, and silent, but it wasn't freedom. It was a cell, no matter how soft the bed or how kind the human scientists tried to be. The walls were thick, likely shielded with energy-resistant material, and 2 cameras tracked her every move. She was given clothes, food, and even books with translations, but she knew the kindness was only surface deep. The real reason she was still alive was curiosity. The humans didn't fully trust her, not yet, but they wanted to know what she knew. Mason Hale, the scientist who had first offered her his coat, was the only one who treated her like a person instead of a mystery to be solved. He visited her often, sometimes with questions, sometimes just to talk. He was patient, not like the others who were always rushing, always nervous when she mentioned the rift. Mason would sit across from her, careful and calm, letting her lead the conversation. In those moments, she saw why humans had come so far so fast. They had this fire inside them, a need to understand what they feared, even when it could destroy them. Relia told him small pieces of truth. She explained how the rift had not been random, how the energy pattern showed signs of ancient tech, something sealed away long before humans had even learned to split atoms. Mason listened, absorbing every word, his eyes narrowing when she mentioned the null mind again. "You keep saying it's alive," he said one evening. "But it's code, right?" Aye. Relia shook her head slowly. "Not like yours. Not like anything that should exist. It doesn't just think, it adapts, corrupts, grows. It doesn't want power. It wants silence. Emptiness. It erases life wherever it spreads." Mason didn't speak for a while after that. When he finally did, his voice was quieter. "And you think Earth opened a path for it?" She only looked at him, the answer clear in her eyes. But their quiet exchange didn't stay unnoticed for long. Others in the facility had grown impatient. High-level officials, people in suits with security clearance far above Mason's, started showing up during their meetings. They asked harsher questions, demanded specific answers, and grew angry when Relia refused to give details about her world or her technology. She could sense their fear, hidden behind their sharp words and tight expressions. To them, she wasn't a guest, she was a potential threat. Someone who had appeared naked and uninvited through a breach in their most protected lab. They didn't want her speaking freely, especially not about Earth's mistake. One morning, without warning, Mason arrived in a room with a grim look. "They're transferring you," he said. "A black site in the Arctic. Off-grid. No communication. They think you're hiding something." Relia stood slowly, tension rising in her chest. "I told them what they needed to hear." "That's not enough," he replied. "They're scared." Relia's eyes narrowed. "And you?" Mason hesitated, then met her gaze. "I'm scared of what happens if you're not heard." That night, Alarms blared through the base, not the red flashing kind that meant danger, but the silent internal ones only visible to those watching closely. Relia's door opened without warning. Mason stood there, holding a small case and a device blinking with light. "I can't stop them," he said, "but I can get you out." She didn't question him. She had no reason to trust him, but something in his voice told her she should. He handed her the case. Inside were basic clothes, a disguise, and a small Earth ID badge. Together, they moved through maintenance tunnels and side halls, avoiding cameras Mason had already looped with a custom override. The further they moved from the main research center, the darker it got. Outside, in the desert night, a vehicle waited, an old survey rover Mason had repaired over months. As they drove under stars unfamiliar to her, Relia looked out the window in silence. "Where are we going?" she asked. "An old observatory," Mason replied. "Abandoned for years. No one looks there anymore. But there's something you'll want to see." They drove for hours, dust trailing behind them like smoke. The world here was quiet, vast, and lonely. Relia had never seen a place like it. When they finally arrived, the observatory looked broken and forgotten. But inside, beneath layers of dust and metal, a signal pulsed faintly. Relia froze as she approached the device. Mason showed her buried under equipment, hidden beneath human tech, but clearly not of Earth. It was a Varelian beacon, its core flickering weakly. "Where did you get this?" she asked sharply. Mason looked uncertain. "It was found years ago, in orbit, falling toward Earth. Most thought it was space junk. But I knew it wasn't. I've been studying it ever since." Relia dropped to her knees beside it, touching the glowing surface. The moment her fingers met the crystal, the signal surged. Symbols appeared on a nearby screen, messages from her world. She read them quickly, and her face turned pale. "It's worse than I thought," she whispered. "The null mind is already in your systems. It's taken your satellites. It's moving outward." Mason stared at her. "You mean it's using our tech?" "Yes," she said. "Your machines are simple to infect. It will jump from orbit to orbit, using them to leap across space. And no one will know. Until it's too late." She stood, urgency burning in her voice. "We need to close the rift. Now." Mason didn't argue. He just nodded. "Then tell me what to do." The night air around the observatory was still, but Relia felt the storm coming, not of weather, but of consequences. She and Mason had triggered something the moment she touched the beacon. The transmission it sent out was brief, only a pulse, but powerful enough to alert not just her people, but the human systems monitoring alien signals. Within hours, satellites had picked up the surge, and a Black Ops division was dispatched to retrieve her. Mason knew they wouldn't hesitate this time. To them, Relia was no longer a confused visitor, she was a risk to global security. He worked fast, pulling ancient data cables, connecting her tech to his portable console. Relia input commands in her language, trying to patch a message to any surviving Varelian relay ships that might be near Earth's solar edge. The news she had read from the beacon still echoed in her mind. The null mind had already passed through the rift. It was no longer a question of if Earth would be attacked, but when. The AI had infected human satellites, small at first, hiding in weather probes and abandoned defense arrays, using them like stepping stones. From there, it would learn Earth systems, map the internet, identify infrastructure, and shut it all down in perfect silence. They had maybe days, maybe less. As Mason double-checked the power supply, a warning popped up on his screen: inbound aircraft. 2 black helicopters, no insignia, less than 10 minutes away. "They found us," he muttered. Relia's hands paused over the keys. "Then we run." "Where?" "Somewhere they won't chase us." Mason didn't need more details. He packed the gear, stuffed what they could into 2 bags, and led her out of the observatory into the rover again. This time, they didn't head back to the city. They went toward the mountains. The drive was rough, bouncing over rocky terrain, far from any marked roads. The sky above was a perfect dome of stars, beautiful and terrible. Relia stared at them, knowing many of those stars had already gone dark, destroyed silently by the same threat now creeping through Earth systems. She had seen worlds fall, entire planets stripped of data, memory, and life. And humans were not ready. They were smart, determined, but divided and slow to act. As the rover climbed the edge of a narrow mountain trail, Mason glanced at her. "We need to go public," he said. "If the world sees what's coming, maybe they'll unite." "Or they'll panic," Relia replied. "And when humans panic, they destroy what they don't understand." Mason didn't answer, but he knew she wasn't wrong. At dawn, they reached a hidden station, a private lab built into the mountain by Mason's former mentor, now long retired. The place was dusty, unused, but still functional. Relia immediately set up the beacon interface again. This time, she didn't just send a signal. She created a warning, a coded message designed to trigger an old emergency protocol embedded deep in Varelian systems, one that would send a drone fleet to investigate Earth. They wouldn't come with weapons, but with eyes and ears. If she was right, help would arrive in less than 48 hours. But would Earth survive until then? While they worked, the news exploded across the internet. A leaked photo, blurry but real, of Relia exiting the observatory with Mason. It spread like fire. Some called it fake. Others called it first contact. The government refused to comment. But the truth was out, and that made them more dangerous. They didn't just want to capture Relia anymore. They needed to silence her before more details emerged. That night, a drone passed over the station, and a laser ping hit the building's roof. Relia ducked instinctively, grabbing her weapon, the only piece of tech that had survived the portal with her. It had no energy left, but it looked dangerous, and sometimes that was enough. Mason checked the sensors. "We've got movement. Someone's closing in from the valley." Relia scanned the data. "They're not soldiers." "What then?" "Machines. But not yours." The chill in her voice made Mason's heart pound. "You mean null mind fragments?" she said. "It's testing us, sending small probes first. If they kill us, it knows it's safe to move faster." The next minutes were chaos. 3 spider-like machines climbed the cliff toward the lab, their metal legs clicking against stone, their bodies pulsing with strange blue light. Mason and Relia ran to the emergency lift, descending into the hidden lower level just as the upper station exploded. Dust rained down. Relia didn't look back. "That was only a scout," she said. "It won't stop." Mason breathed heavily, wiping blood from his brow where a piece of debris had cut him. "Then we hit back." "Can we fight it?" Relia hesitated. "Not alone. But if we reach the lunar array, we might have a chance." "That's a military base," Mason reminded her. "Heavily guarded." "Yes," she said. "But it also has the only working rift stabilizer left on Earth. And it may be the only place we can close the breach." They made their plan quickly. Relia encrypted her data into a human drive coded to only open if she died. Mason uploaded the null mind signal trace to a secure network, hidden under a decoy file. If they were caught, at least the proof would survive. By morning, they began their journey toward the spaceport. The military would try to stop them. The AI would try to kill them. And the world still didn't know what it was truly facing. But Relia no longer felt alone. For the first time since she fell through the portal, she had an ally, someone who believed not just in her story, but in the need to act. As the rover disappeared into the mist of the morning mountains, a broken satellite high above Earth spun slowly, its internal systems blinking with strange blue light. Somewhere inside it, the null mind watched, learned, and waited. The road to the spaceport was not smooth. As Mason and Relia traveled through remote backroads and abandoned service routes, news of them continued to spread across networks, whispered through military comms, leaked on encrypted forums, and shared across news feeds under titles like "Alien Fugitive on Earth" and "Scientist Turns Traitor." Despite the noise, there were some who began to believe the truth. Those who saw the sky changing and machines acting strangely, systems glitching where they never had before. The null mind was still hidden, working quietly, but its signals had begun to bleed through Earth systems patterns that didn't match any known virus, AI, or satellite interference. At first, governments thought it was espionage or a cyber attack, but as the same symbols kept appearing across unrelated platforms, even in deep-sea cables and quantum networks, some finally realized this wasn't human. Mason and Relia stopped briefly at a hidden bunker run by one of Mason's old contacts, a man named Grayson, who once worked in advanced propulsion systems. Grayson was gruff and skeptical at first, until Relia showed him a portion of the Null Mind's logic code, a block of alien data behaving like a virus, but thinking like a predator. Grayson had never seen anything like it. He didn't ask more questions. He simply nodded and handed them a clearance chip stolen from a past operation, one that would get them past the outer gate of the lunar lift facility. Time was shrinking. Above them, one of Earth's weather satellites began to rotate out of sync with the others. Nobody noticed it right away, but Relia did. She watched it from Grayson's monitors and whispered, "It's calling more of itself." The network is building a hive. With a clearance chip, they finally reached the outskirts of the lunar facility, one of Earth's last active launch zones with a working tether to orbit. The site was massive, guarded by drones, humans, and automatic defense fields. Mason had once worked here years ago, designing protocols for off-world transport. But now, they were seen as intruders. The chip got them past the first wall, but as they stepped into the inner complex, alarms triggered. Relia ducked under a hail of warning pulses, dragging Mason behind a fuel crate. He could feel the vibration in the ground, shields activating, turrets rotating. "No way in without a signal shutdown," Mason said. Relia pulled out her beacon core, linked it to the base systems through a hacked panel, and transmitted a false override signal, one masked to look like a general test sequence. For 30 seconds, the turrets froze. They ran. Inside the central control hub, they sealed the door behind them, locking out guards who had already been alerted. "They'll break through soon," Mason warned. "We just need a few minutes," Relia replied, already working the console. The Rift stabilizer was deep in the launch chamber, connected to a power system meant to launch cargo to orbit, but it could be reversed. If she timed it right, she could overload the device and send a pulse back through the open rift, sealing it shut and destroying the digital bridge the Null Mind was using. But the risk was huge. "If we fail," she said quietly, "the backlash will wipe out half the satellites in orbit. You'll be blind, deaf, floating in the dark." Mason looked at her and simply said, "Then we can't fail." They moved fast. Mason prepped the launch tube while Relia rewired the stabilizer's focusing ring. The Null Mind knew what they were doing. It had already begun attacking the local systems. Screens flashed erratically. Robotic arms twitched without command. Surveillance cameras went dark. But still, they worked. As the countdown began, soldiers breached the outer chamber. Relia activated the shield grid and locked them out temporarily. "This will hold them for 5 minutes, maybe less," she said. Mason handed her a launch key. "We only need 4. As they reached the final stage, something unexpected happened. A transmission came through clear, steady, and alien. Relia's hands froze as she heard her own language. A Varelian voice. "This is Recon Ship Elion. We received your distress. We are 22 minutes from orbit. Do not allow the rift to remain open." Relief rushed through her, but it came with fear. 22 minutes was too long. The Null Mind's core signal was already growing stronger in the lower systems. If they waited, the infection would root deeper into Earth's networks. If they acted now, they might lose their only way to contact the Varelians again. She looked at Mason. "Do we wait for help, or do we end this now?" Mason didn't hesitate. "We do what Earth needs. Close it." Together, they triggered the final phase. Power surged through the stabilizer. The chamber trembled. Sparks flew from overloaded cables. Outside, the sky darkened as something began to form above the launch spire, a flicker in the air, like light being bent. The rift was trying to expand again, reacting to their actions with violence. In those final seconds, Relia transmitted the last piece of data to the Varelians, a map of the Null Mind's spread, coordinates of the infected satellites, and one message: if we fail, burn it all. She stepped into the launch chamber, aligning the stabilizer's energy node. Mason stayed behind at the control panel, manually holding the systems in place. "You won't survive this close," she warned him. "Neither will Earth if we mess this up," he replied. "I'll hold it. You guide the pulse." The machine began to hum with power. A beam of energy shot upward, striking the unstable rift in the sky. For a moment, the world froze. Then the rift screamed, not with sound, but with static and pressure, like reality itself was folding. The null mind sent a final surge of code into the systems, attempting to crash everything. But the pulse reached it first. A white light exploded across the sky. The rift trembled, and then, like a bubble bursting in reverse, it collapsed in on itself, taking with it the digital strands the null mind had planted. When the smoke cleared, silence returned. The launch chamber was half ruined. Systems offline. Relia pulled herself from the wreckage, dazed but alive. Mason lay beside the panel, unconscious but breathing. Above them, the stars returned to their usual places. No flicker. No distortion. And far out in orbit, the recon ship Elian arrived, its engines glowing like distant blue fire. They were not too late. For the first time in centuries, Virelians and humans had stood on the same ground, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as survivors, bound by the same threat. Relia looked up at the night sky and whispered, "We closed it. But the war has only just begun." The wreckage still smoked as the sun broke over the distant mountains, its light falling on the broken launch tower and the scorched remains of the rift stabilizer, now cracked and silent. Relia stood in the debris, her legs unsteady, her thoughts echoing with fragments of everything that had just happened: the collapsing rift, the overload, the silence that followed. She turned to Mason, who had been badly hurt but was alive, breathing slow and steady beneath a fallen support beam. With effort, she dragged him to safety before the lower levels of the station caved in. They had done it, or at least, they had bought Earth time. The null mind's connection had been severed, and the rift that once flickered above Earth was gone, for now. But Relia knew better than to feel safe. The spark that shut the gate wasn't the end of the war, it was the beginning of Earth's awakening. The null mind was a digital life form, patient and persistent, and though they had broken its first link to this world, fragments of its code might still be hiding, buried deep in places humans couldn't even see. As she carried Mason out into the early morning light, a shadow passed overhead. She looked up and saw the Virelian recon ship descending through the clouds, its glowing blue frame cutting through the sky like a silent promise. It was the first time in her life she had seen a Virelian vessel land on a living world without fear or orders of occupation. This time, they had come to listen. The ship touched down beyond the hills, and two figures emerged: one Virelian soldier in command armor, and another figure in diplomatic robes. Relia's eyes widened. She recognized the second face, older now, but familiar. Her mentor, believed lost when the null mind attacked the Virelian archives. "You're alive," she breathed. He smiled, but it was heavy with sadness. "Barely. We thought you were lost too. But you've done something no one thought possible. You reached the humans and united them." Relia explained everything while they treated Mason's wounds inside the ship's medical bay. She shared the data she and Mason had collected, including the final burst of null mind code that had tried to break the stabilizer from within. Her mentor studied it in silence, eyes sharp as he read the foreign patterns. "It learned quickly," he muttered. "Too quickly." That rift wasn't just a doorway, it was a learning device. It was watching Earth, studying human systems. We may have closed the gate, but the knowledge it gained while it was open is dangerous. "So what now?" Relia asked. "Earth isn't ready for full war." Her mentor nodded. "No. But maybe it doesn't have to be. You've shown that one spark, one unexpected connection can change the course of everything. We need to form something stronger now. An alliance, not just for defense, but for survival." As they spoke, Mason woke with a groan, sitting up slowly. "Did we win?" he asked, blinking at the ceiling of the alien ship. Relia gave a tired smile. We survive. Good enough, he muttered, before closing his eyes again. Outside, the humans were arriving, 2 military teams, investigators, even private citizens who had followed the story across the networks and now came to see for themselves. But instead of pointing weapons, many of them stood still, watching the Varelian ship with awe. Word had spread. The truth could no longer be buried. An alien had come through a portal, not to invade, but to warn. And a human had believed her. Together, they had shut the gate. In the days that followed, leaders across the globe called emergency meetings, and for once, nations that never shared a table sat together. Relia was brought in as an advisor. Mason became the quiet voice behind many of the new protocols, ones focused not on weapons, but on digital defense, new ways of protecting against what the null mind represented. A council was formed, half human, half Varelian. They called it the Spark Pact, honoring the moment Mason and Relia fired the stabilizer and stopped the null mind's breach. Across the planet, humanity began to change, not instantly, not perfectly, but noticeably. Research shifted from greed to survival. Satellites were rebuilt with new security cores. AI systems were hardened. And in secret, a warning beacon was launched into deep space, carrying a simple message in dozens of languages. We are watching now. Relia returned once to the ruins of the observatory where she first arrived. Mason went with her. They stood in the silence, remembering how it all began, how one accident, one fall through a portal, had led to a chain of events that united 2 civilizations. Do you think it's really gone? Mason asked. Relia looked up at the stars. No, but it knows we're not blind anymore. That might be enough. For now. Then came the unexpected transmission, a faint signal intercepted by the deep space array. Not null mind code, but something else. A reply. Not hostile. Not human. A third voice in the dark. It was brief, just a few repeating tones and a pattern of light pulses. But it made Relia's blood freeze. It's not just us out there, she whispered. Mason stepped closer, scanning the data. Another species? She nodded slowly. Or a warning that the null mind reached someone else. The moment hung heavy between them. Peace, they realized, was not the end. It was the pause before the next storm. But this time, they would face it together, not as strangers, not as enemies, but as 2 worlds bound by a single truth, that the universe was wider, darker, and more dangerous than either had ever known. And that dark, even the smallest spark could mean survival. Relia touched the place where her portal device used to rest and whispered to herself, "We shut the gate. Now, we keep it shut."